Well, hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Set Piece. I'm Robert Grieve, and with me this week is not Bill Leckie. We have David Friel, who appears to be on social media sites, left, right and centre, everywhere you look. The most popular man at Scottish Sunsport. But Mr. Bill Leckie's not here. A lot going on, David.
It is, but it's good to see you back, Robert.
I'm just back.
You've been Judith Chalmers.
Judith, our younger viewers will have no idea who Judith Chalmers are.
How many countries have you been in the last couple of days?
I've been in a few. I went to 4 countries in one afternoon on Saturday. I was away with Scotland, covering the Scotland game. We'll be touching that in a minute at the end. Yeah, a lot of travelling, back late last night. If they've got bleary eyes, that's the reason. But there's been a lot going on while I've been away.
Plenty
going on. You've touched on it a wee bit at various points earlier in the week, but what do you make it? Celtic, let's start with Celtic. Honestly, what is going on at that football club? Because they just seem to maybe the statement everyone saw on Saturday night. I was in Hungary when it came out. Brendan Rodgers, where does this leave Brendan Rodgers? David, talk to me about the Celtic manager, because
we're a few days after the statement. We've everyone has had their say on it, and all clearly not good. Brendan Rodgers, where it leaves him, I think Celtic as a club need the football back on. Okay, there probably will be protests, etc. at Rugby Park, but I think they just need to get the ball back out and try and focus on what's happening on the pitch. Where it leaves him, I think he's it's quite a delicate, fragile situation. Clearly, all's not well. And Brendan Rodgers, I think he had a couple of days break. He's back on the training ground. Celtic have posted YouTube footage of the training and all that sort of stuff. And it leaves him in charge of the club. I know there's probably understandably question marks over how long. But as we sit here right now, it's a complex situation, but I think he'll probably stay now.
Stay now, what? What does that mean?
Stay now means, I think now, that he will
beyond this season.
No, he'll not stay beyond the season. No, that's. I think that no. I mean, that's.
I think
not,
if he was going to
start, but my point is, there are understandably questions over whether he will stay in the short term. I think he probably will now.
Yeah, I think if he was going to leave Celtic, he would have done it by now. If he was going to resign on the back of this situation, he surely would have been away by now.
Right.
I think that would have already have happened. So I think the fact that he's still there, I think the fact that you say there's been videos of him taking training, and he actually was obviously in the building, he was giving big hugs and kisses to Iheanacho when he was come in. I think if Brendan Rodgers was going to have reacted to the situation, he would have been away. Personally, I think he probably should have.
Do you honestly think he should have resigned or walked away?
I don't think, we wrote about this and we spoke about this a while ago. I don't think Brendan Rodgers wants to stay beyond this season. I think that's always been his plan, to see out this season and ride off into the sunset. Now, as you say, you touched on it, he wants to go a winner. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think his biggest task when he came back to Celtic was to win back the Celtic fans, was to get back on side with the Celtic fans. If he walked away the morning after the transfer deadline, he couldn't possibly have been a bigger hero with the Celtic fans. That would have made him. That would have secured his legacy forevermore. So if that's been part of his thinking coming back, it must have been something they thought about. I think it must have been something they thought about, because I think he's now, as you touched on, he's now in a very, very difficult position. He speaks on Friday at his press conference, and I'll be fascinated to see how he handles this, because right now the Celtic fans are against the board. They're against Dermot Desmond, they're against Peter Lawwell, they're against Michael Nicholson, and everyone who's on that board, they're against the PR department for that statement. What does Brendan Rodgers say next? Who does he align himself with? Because the Celtic board will be looking for him to explain their decision making, to support their decision making. I mean, a couple of weeks ago he's talking about how the board and guys behind the scenes bleed Celtic. You know, that didn't get down well with the Celtic support. So in the back of this statement, in the back of the transfer window and how it shaped out, I think, as you say, delicate. Wow, Brendan Rodgers has to choose his words very carefully, and I think it's a very, very difficult situation for him to be in, and that's why I do wonder. That's got to be one of the questions he gets asked on Friday. Did he consider resigning? Because he has to have. For me, it has to have been I'd be astonished if you didn't think about it, if you hadn't thought about it, because so much has happened. And I don't know, listen, as I said, I wrote about it months ago. I wrote a column about it, I think, saying I thought he was going to go at the end of the season, and people were outraged by it, and, oh, you want him out the door. I do not want Brendan Rodgers out the door for Scottish football. I think Brendan Rodgers is fantastic for Scottish football. I think he's good for Celtic. I don't think Celtic can get a better manager than they've got right now. Now, they potentially could, but what I mean is, it'd be very difficult for them. They've got someone who, for me, is top level. Mm-hmm. So, do you know, I think I'm really. How do you think he handles it on Friday?
I don't know how he handles it.
Do you know what I mean? See what I'm saying?
I mean, it's a
delicate one.
As I said, it's delicate, complicated. We did go ballistic the other day with Chris Boyd, and I was talking about how is it even a workable situation where you know a manager's going, you know a manager has gone through a transfer window, he's clearly not happy, there's clearly issues behind the scenes. Do you then have a January window, for example, where it's important for Celtic to strengthen when you have a manager in place who isn't going to be there? I get all that. I get actually the argument where a lot of Celtic fans are saying he should have walked away, delivered some home truths, and that would be his legacy in an attempt to change the strategy, whatever you want to call it, the club. I just look at Brendan Rodgers, especially after it happened the first time, and I can understand if he has come to the decision. I agree with you, I think he probably did, because he was undermined as well with Daizen Maeda going, because he did say a couple of days before that Daizen Maeda will not be sold unless there's a replacement in. Daizen Maeda was sold without a replacement being in. However, I just look at it and think that I wonder whether Brendan Rodgers is going, I don't want to go out sniping and moaning. Yeah. And maybe he has a great, maybe he would be well within his rights to do that. I think he'll want to leave as a winner. To me, Brendan Rodgers now, and again, I'm not sure it is a workable situation, but I'm saying if Celtic can come to some form of truce, some sort of peace pact, I think it would be better for Brendan Rodgers' legacy if he can make the best of this situation. Look, if Celtic had signed Kasper Dolberg, for example, Tonecti came too late, Balawisha came too late. My point is, Celtic's squad right now is weaker than it was last season. If they'd signed Dolberg, it would probably have been pretty level, right? Potentially. I think Brendan Rodgers has to look at this and say, I am going to coach better than I ever have in my life. I'm going to leave Celtic at the end of the season with more trophies, and that'll be my legacy. And see if he wants to have his say after that, then have your say. As I said, I don't know if this is a workable situation. I still think there's a couple of twists to come here. However, I can understand if Brendan Rodgers just says, you know what, I'll see this out, I'll get all my players together, let's make the best of this, let's have a season to remember, and then he can have his say.
I think you're right. I think that's what's going to happen, because I think if he was going to go, he'd be away by now. I think it would have happened last week. I think he'd have probably thought about it over a couple of days and decided, right, especially after the statement, you know, it's the Limmy thing, isn't it? They've not backed down, they've doubled down, you know, and we'll not go into the statement, but that just shows the attitude that the people in charge have got, that they don't think they've necessarily done anything wrong. So Brendan Rodgers, for all the messaging that's come out from him in the last number of months, has pointed to, we need to change the way we do things, and it's clear that the people in charge don't necessarily think they can change the way they do things, because they're trying to explain all these mitigating circumstances surrounding why they couldn't get deals done. So if you actually go through their statement, and we're not going to, but it doesn't point to them thinking there's things that they can change.
No.
They just say, well, we can't get deals done because other clubs and other agents and other players, and so you're thinking, well, so if you're the Celtic manager, if you're Brendan Rodgers, you're not reading that and thinking, right, well, they're taking on board what I'm saying, and the whole timing. He kept on talking about the timing of it. They're trying to get deals, but it's got to be the timing of it. The guys whoever wrote that statement, who wrote the statement?
I don't know.
Nobody knows, right? Whoever wrote that statement doesn't agree with that.
I know, and that's the bigger picture stuff that we've touched on, and it's Brendan Rodgers. It's clear that it's not going to change. He's not going to change it. Right? And that's my point. It comes back to, does he go out all guns blazing and say, I tried to get him to change this?
I don't think he would do that either. But I don't think he would even have to do that. I think if Brendan Rodgers had quit Celtic on Monday morning, he would just have to, quitting the job would have been statement enough.
Oh, it would have been, but it brings you back to your question you asked me, what does he say? I think if Brendan Rodgers comes out on Friday and just lobs in how he's unhappy with this, unhappy with that, unhappy X, Y, and Z, and really goes for it, I think it's over.
Yeah, and I don't think he'll do that.
And I don't really
think he'll do that.
I think, see if he has decided...
I don't think he can do that.
See if he's decided that I'm just going to stay, providing the club, we can work together in some form of way, I'm going to stay. I think there has to be a kind of almost I said it before, a peace pact. It has to be a truce.
But should he do that though, David? Should he do that though? There will be Celtic fans who look at him and think, well, you've just aligned yourself to the board who we're against.
He can do it without praising what's going on. He's not going to insult people's intelligence and say, I was really happy with the window, because he clearly wasn't. My point would be, as you say, he's got questions to answer. Did he consider his position given what had happened? Will he definitely leave it in the season? It's never been said.
Yeah, that's something that has to get nailed down.
It has to. Is he entering the last 9 months of his
I think the last time he spoke about his contract, he said that the club hadn't even offered him a contract. Yeah. I think that's changed. I think in the back of that, I think there were discussions. My information is there were discussions about a contract, and that it was put to him what that would look like. So I think that has changed. But yeah, I think that has to be nailed down. I think on Friday, one of the things he has to talk about is whether he is staying beyond this season. This can't linger on now for Celtic fans. I think they are due the truth about what's happening next at Celtic, and I think it would actually help Brendan Rodgers also.
It would help the club.
It would help the club for real clarity, for him to come out and say, right, listen, my 6 years is up at the end of the season. I'm going, but between now and then, I'm all in to try and win. I think, and that would give the Celtic fans, I think, time to process that, and I think it would also help clarify this whole situation and maybe help with that truce that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Because I think if he doesn't do that, and he gives out and he says certain things that he has said before about, just kind of repeats what he said about how things need to be better and how Celtic need to progress and do things differently in the transfer market, and almost repeats himself, fine, but he's just kicking the can down the road with his own situation, and I think that's a big part of it. I think the Celtic fans are entitled to know now what's going to happen next.
But it's funny because one of Brendan Rodgers, I mean, myself and yourself, Robert, how many times we've interviewed Brendan Rodgers over the years? Hundreds. One of the things he says quite a lot is Celtic are their best when everybody's united, when everything's connected, and from the club, from the board to supporters. That couldn't be further from the truth just now. And if that goes on, the season will just unravel. It genuinely will unravel. That, I don't care what anybody says. See, when there is stuff going on behind the scenes, it filters onto the pitch. It has to filter onto the pitch. We're going to go on and talk about Daizen Maeda. There's other subplots to all this. Other players being left out of squads and players not happy not getting moves. That Celtic can't afford to have any more infighting, any more sniping, both publicly and privately. They have to put on a united front. They have to come to some sort of agreement. I'm talking about Brendan Rodgers and the hierarchy. That, as you said, I think the best thing they can do is come out on Friday or come out before then and say, Brendan's been great, it's not going to continue beyond the season, but between now and then, you make the best of it. I think that's the only thing that can happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be all golden behind the scenes. Probably won't be. But
Celtic can still end up having a good season.
No, they will. Celtic are still favourites for the league. They're still favourites. If you go to any bookies just now and say who's going to win the Scottish Cup, they'll say Celtic should win the League Cup.
Yeah.
You know, Celtic have got a Europa League campaign to go through. Now, every Celtic fan and Brendan Rodgers and even members of the board would say the squad isn't as strong as it should be. However, you know, there's a squad there that can have success this season. I think the biggest barrier to Celtic having success this season is Celtic and the infighting that's going on. If they can get some form of united front, whether it's fragile, whether it's a bit, then I think they can do that. If the fighting goes on and the sniping goes on, it's going to unravel.
You know yourself, there's always, when things are going badly and things are toxic off the pitch, it just needs something on the pitch to go awry. To suddenly it's tenfold. You know, it multiplies itself. Celtic are playing Kelly at Rugby Park. Tough game. You know, the tough pitch. We always go on about the pitch. Celtic, if they kind of stumble there, the Celtic fans who are going to no doubt have banners and be making their voice heard at Rugby Park. If they're struggling against a Kelly team, then you can You know, it's
the most important. To me, it's and like, time will tell. And look, there could be cup finals down the line, Old Firm game, etc. To me, it's the most important game of Celtic season. Robert, you're down there covering the game. It's going to be fascinating off the pitch to see what happens, but on the pitch will shape so much for me. Because if Celtic drop anything, if Celtic struggle at all, if they lose, then the noise is just going to get bigger, louder, and everything around it. And that's what I'm saying. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes this week in terms of talks with Brendan Rodgers and those above him. I'm assuming they're going on over the general state of affairs. But if the toxicity around the club just now, all the fans and everything that's going on continues, then, as I say, that I just think it could be a difficult season. Yeah,
well, you mentioned Maeda, Daizen Maeda. Obviously, the story came out a couple of days ago and it was clear, you could see in his body language in the last couple of weeks that he wasn't in a great place. I think that was quite obvious. He thought he was going to move. The move didn't materialise. He's still at Celtic. How do you see this kind of developing?
Difficult.
Because by the way, he's a huge player for Celtic.
He's a huge player, and again, it comes back to probably a lot of themes we've just spoken about with Brendan Rodgers. Like, Daizen Maeda has made it clear he would rather leave Celtic just now. And I don't think that's a dig at Celtic. He's just ready for the next step, and I don't think any Celtic fan out there would grudge him that. You know, he's a guy who gives his all in terms of his work rate. I think he's been a brilliant player for Celtic, bought for buttons. He deserves a move. It so happened he couldn't get a move. Brendan Rodgers